2020. We are in the community wing of City Hall. This is the City Council special budget hearing. I call the meeting to order. Could we all stand and pledge the allegiance to the flag, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mayor Alphen.
Present.
Vice Mayor Branquino.
Right here.
Councilmember Barbosa.
Here.
Councilmember Danko.
Here.
Councilmember Clufus.
Present.
Mayor, all members are present.
Thank you. Let me begin. This is a budget hearing. We each have different opinions and views regarding the agenda. I encourage each of you to participate in the discussion with the understanding that we must form a consensus and majority vote to approve budget items this evening. I also encourage each of you to respect each member's right to participate while acting with decorum and professional courtesy. I will recognize each council member individually. Each council member will be recognized for all relevant points they choose to present. Council members will please address all comments to me as your chair. I will not recognize and I will interrupt conversation between unrecognized council members. The budget work has been ongoing for many months. I will ask each council member to avoid generalities and offer specific additions and changes to budget line items. We have reached our deadline and we must approve a budget this evening. So with that, I would like to begin with a presentation from Finance on our budget. You go ahead and begin.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tonight we will be presenting the fiscal year 2021 estimated budget, the proposed millage rate, and the proposed fiscal year 2022 budget. We will now review the proprietary funds operating budgets in summary. We reviewed in great detail at the July 27th and August 24th workshops. There are no significant changes in these funds from your final budget workshop. Water and wastewater division increase from 5% from the previous fiscal year is due mainly to growth-related demands, as well as 7 new position requests to include customer service, water and wastewater technicians, as well as 1 senior project manager, in addition to regular operating increases. We will now look at the stormwater management budget. The increase of 40% from the previous fiscal year is due to both capital and operational increases. The fiscal year 2022 revenue budget includes a new loan in the amount of $8 million for capital construction as outlined in the rate study for the implementation of the enhanced stormwater program, as well as the increases approved by council resolution based on the rate study. The operating portion is increasing due to the request of the 5 new positions and regular operating increases. The building fund is increasing by 8%. There are no new position requests, just an allocation change for the code supervisor. Council approved the rate changes at the July 20th business meeting. These projections are reflected in those rates. The solid waste fund accounts for the contract with Waste Pro. The budget presented assumes an increase of 4.1%, mainly due to the new accounts that have been added. The current contract expires May of 2022. Once council approves the new contract, we will update the budget and projections as needed. The IT Enterprise Fund accounts for the fiber and cell tower revenues and expenditures. The increase of 8% is mainly due to operating expenditures. Are there any questions on the proprietary fund budgets?
Council members, any questions at this time? Councilman Danko, any questions?
Nope.
I have one question. Are there estimates on when we're going to be able to fill these FTEs in the current dynamic that we're in? I know that there is an issue right now trying to find employees for certain positions. Do we anticipate, or do we have an anticipated length of time or duration before these positions are filled?
So we do have challenges in filling positions. I think everybody else around us does too. So what we've done with certain positions that are harder to fill is we budgeted for a certain percentage of the fiscal year. So knowing that we probably wouldn't find somebody starting right away, we budgeted them either January 1st or April 1st, depending on the type of position.
Understood.
Please go ahead, proceed.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now present the capital funds budget. Carl Cody reviewed these in details with council at the August 10th workshop and August 24th workshop. There are no significant changes from the workshops. The next slide contains a summary of major capital projects included in the fiscal 2022 budget. As you can see, the focus on the capital projects funds will be the public works facility and needed IT infrastructure upgrades. The Streets Improvement Fund will be on the pavement program. Council approved a work order with Transmap to update the pavement conditions survey. The Transportation Impact Fee Fund will include the Citation Boulevard extension. The Recreation Impact Fee Fund has several projects, including the Lehigh Trailhead and the Recreation Center project. The utility capital projects include the wastewater plant number 2 expansion that is being funded with SRF loans, as well as other system improvement projects. The Stormwater Management Fund includes several capital improvements that are being funded using both SRF and bank loans. Are there any questions on the capital funds?
Any
project
questions from council at this time?
Nope.
I have none.
Please continue.
We will now review the internal services funds. We reviewed these in detail with council at the August 10th and August 24th workshops. There have been no changes. The city has 4 internal service funds. Basically, this is how we budget for departments that provide day-to-day services and support to other city departments. The fleet maintenance is requesting 2 new positions, a mechanic 1 and 3. The fleet fund is increasing by 22.9%. This fund fluctuates depending on the capital purchases under the fleet replacement program. As Matt Mansell reviewed with council at the August 10th budget workshop, the replacement list started with 220 assets. After reviewing an assessment, fleet is recommending the replacement of 78, as well as 16 new assets for departmental needs. The facilities maintenance increase of 52.8% is mainly due to the transfer of the facilities mowing crew and respective operating expenditures to this fund from the Public Works Streets Maintenance. The IT Internal Services Operation Fund is critical to the day-to-day operations of the city. The increase of 36.1% is due to a combination of a new position requested, 1.5 positions transferred from the General Fund Administrative Services, as well as an increase in regular operating expenditures and software. In addition, there is a fund balance appropriation to fund critical ERP updates that are needed. The following slide provides the detail of the fleet purchases. As you can see, we have a little over $600,000 in new equipment requests and approximately $5.2 million for fleet replacement, of which $1.9 is for white fleet and approximately $600,000 for a fire pumper. Are there any questions on the internal services funds?
No questions.
Please continue.
We will now review the special revenue funds. This is the summary of all the special revenue funds. There are no changes from your August 24th budget workshop. As you can see, fiscal year 2022 proposed budget totals $10.7 million, with the largest majority attributable to the American Rescue Plan Act Fund and the State Road 100 CRA budget. Are there any questions on the special revenue funds?
Any questions, Councilman?
None.
Thank you. Please continue.
Helena will now review the general fund.
Thank you. We will proceed to the general fund. So we're first going to review the expenditure summary, and then we will review revenues. We will go over millage options and scenarios. So starting with expenditures, an overall increase of 5.7%. Administrative services budgets are increasing by 8%. There are 1.5 FTE increases in these departments. The balance is comprised of regular operating increases, as discussed in prior budget workshops. Construction management and engineering's budget is increasing by 21.9% due to a new position requested and regular operating increases. The planning and code enforcement budget is increasing 6.1%, mainly due to requests for a new planning technician to meet the level of service and regular operating increases. The fire department budget is increasing by 10.4%, mainly due to 3 new firefighter positions and the respective equipment needs. The law enforcement budget is increasing by 42.1%. Since your workshop of September 7th, we updated the Flagler County Sheriff's Office contract for enhanced law enforcement to add 10 new deputies in addition to the contractual increase of 3.5% to the contract as a whole. Parks and Recreation budget is increasing by 17.3% due to adding 2 new FTEs for maintenance plus their required equipment, as well as seasoned part-time position hours to accommodate additional programs and provide support for current operations. The balance is attributable to regular operating increases. The Public Works street maintenance budget has a decrease. While they requested 2 new FTEs, a signal technician and a maintenance technician, they're also moving 7 facilities mowing individual FTEs to the Internal Services Facilities Fund. Now, the decrease in non-departmental is due in part to the Metnex initiative not carrying to fiscal year 2022. We're also requesting a contingency of $650,000 for the purpose of handling fluctuations in revenues and expenditures. And we are proposing a transfer of $550,000 to the Streets Improvement Fund to help with a shortage in the pavement program. So here we have a summary.
I am going to stop you there. I do have a question, please.
Same, yeah, I'd also have a question.
Go ahead if you have a question.
So my question revolves around the Flagler County Sheriff's contract, and I think this is where a lot of us are, the 4 additional deputies that when we first had the presentation, the sheriff was looking for 10 deputies, and then we had come to a conclusion that we were going to be able to provide 6. I'm a little bit disappointed that we didn't try to look at a phased approach to try to mitigate some of this, pressure that we're feeling now, trying to figure out how to get these other 4 FTEs into this budget cycle. But I also am curious, and I'd love to hear from the sheriff about how they plan to fill the 25, new vacancies of the employees that they're going to be needing for the deputies, and what the structure of the contract looks like if they have difficulty filling these new roles. I know we have had in the past, but I'm not in law enforcement. I don't know how effective the hiring force is right now. But what's it look like as far as when these deputies will actually be patrolling our streets and the timeline? Do we have any answers for that?
I don't have that information.
So I understand your question, Councilman Clufus. You're asking, how long does it take to train up a deputy? Is that
Yep.
most of the question?
Correct.
How far in advance do we need to make the hire before they become effective in providing public safety?
Yeah, because my question really revolves around if it takes a year to find a deputy to patrol, is there a pro rate for not having that deputy on for a year in the contract? And because there's 15 at the county level and then 10 at the city level, that's a lot of deputies, and that is just, it's the way it is. Perhaps it won't be difficult.
You're asking, is there a similar proration as finance had suggested with the other FTEs?
For rolling hires, yeah.
Rolling hire.
And in the past, when we added the 5 deputies, the Mustangs into Palm Coast, that I believe was also a phased approach, and that was successful. But I think in the future, when we come to these type of things, and we're debating and constructive communication about how we can move forward with these programs, when we have differentials like that, I was a little kind of taken back. We went from 6 to 10 so easily without even talking about phasing them. That would relieve a lot of our issues right now. It certainly would cause less kerfuffle between all of us because we wouldn't have the budget issues we're having, and we'd be able to fully fund the street maintenance program. But yeah, that is the long and short of my question, is what that looks like as far as the rolling hires for potentially 25 deputies.
So is that a question that we can ask finance? Did you use a proration equation similar to other arithmetic you did as you represented before?
No, because this is a contract. That direction would have to come from council.
In answer to your other question regarding what time, with your permission, Your Honor, we have a representative, a high representative, the sheriff over here. I don't know if he could say anything regarding the timeline to hire, if you allow, Mr. Mayor. Okay.
Council is okay with?
I was going to suggest the
Chief
same
Strobridge,
thing.
if you could help us with the answer. I think it's a good question.
You know, it's a great question. Mark Strobridge, Flagler County Sheriff's Office. We are already in the recruiting process. We have our first class that's classing up October the 4th, actually. Part of our contract is to provide those services right away. And as soon as they are rolling on the street in this first class, we're not really having a great difficulty hiring people. Our time lag is only in a training process. But as with the new positions like we did before, there's an opportunity to take care of some of those issues. And if you want to specifically talk about them, we can talk about them in the contract phase as well, or whatever direction you want to do. Certainly, we have a pool of candidates that are sitting ready to go. It does take a little bit of time to hire them.
That certainly alleviates one of my concerns,
Okay.
and I understand you have an academy and all of that. But
Chief,
one more
Not
question.
so fast. You can't get away that quick from us, please.
As far as the global shortage in chips and things, what about hardware for these deputies? 25 officers as far as new vehicles and potentially facing shortages there.
I'm glad that's a great question as well. We actually already have a fleet ordered.
Excellent.
And what we will do is, because there is a lag time, that is, we will keep older cars on the street for a little while longer, that's all.
Good. Okay, fair. Thank you.
Councilman Barbosa.
What is an enhanced contract?
It's a level of service over and above what the county would provide as the taxpayers pay for those dollars. So enhanced contract is those additional resources that are used within the city that would not normally be provided in the county.
And would accounting know the extra cost in this?
So the contract is to provide the enhanced
services
services.
altogether.
Yes.
Okay.
So in this case, the entire contract, not just the increase, for the next fiscal year would be the $5,735,500.
So if I misspeak, correct me. Just to add some detail, I have reviewed the enhanced contract. And I'll pick out 2 examples to make a point. We currently have 1 deputy assigned to child predator crimes. Now, if you look at the number of hours that occur during a week, 1 deputy can only work so many hours. So that obviously leaves a huge number of hours unattended. There has been an increase in child predator crimes, and this is an example of both an enhanced and a reason for an extra deputy. From memory, I'll offer one other example. There are more, and forgive me, I don't remember all of them. But we currently have 1 shared semi-volunteer deputy that patrols the intercoastal waterway.
I waved to him when I was on the waterway cleanup this weekend.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, good.
Yeah, he was nice.
So he's only a part-timer because I believe he's a reserve officer with another agency or something else.
He is a full-timer in that particular position, but he has to split his time across the entire
So
county.
the point being that we're making an attempt at patrolling these areas where, for those of you that may remember recently, people in the C-section neighborhoods were concerned about perhaps illegal things happening, people coming in on crafts, on whatever. This would be an example of where we would add additional manpower. Certainly not enough to cure it, but to improve the situation we have. So there are a number of other line items within the contract for the enhanced services. And it is my understanding that every one of the new deputies has very specific assignments like that. Not those, but like that.
Yes, sir.
I think they also said cybercrime too, right?
Again, there are others, I'm sorry, I don't remember all the different line items. Any other questions for the chief while he's at the podium? That would be helpful this evening?
Not now.
Thank you, chief. Elena, okay?
Thank you.
Sorry, I had, that was your question. I had a question as well regarding fire, equally important as the police. We had a conversation about citation. We talked about the eventual or the future savings involved with having a single fire station instead of two. We wouldn't realize any savings in this next fiscal year on that future project, would we?
I don't believe so. This is to run current operations.
But the savings that we're talking
Chief,
about
okay.
would, if you don't mind, if you
Forte's
don't mind,
available?
just so we can get this out. And Chief, I'm just looking for in what future period we might enjoy the difference
Yes, Mayor.
between two versus one.
Jerry Forte, Palm Coast Fire Chief, interim assistant city manager. Basically, the fire station on Belterre would have been scheduled for somewhere around 2030, which was built into the fire impact fee. Once we have the road established on citation, we know we can get to the K section and the very end of the double L section. Then we can back that out of the fire impact study when we do that's natural review in 2 to 3 more years, and then we can see whether the funding is going to be needed at that point. Right now, if we don't build the road, the impact fee report will still contain a station on that location. If we do build the road, that's something that we can pull out and not use in the future development, but we're looking about 8 to 10 years out.
But the planning, the design, the expenses that go in the early stages are something that we could benefit as a decrease in an expense in a shorter timeline.
If it was a shorter timeline, for example, Station 26, we're looking at design next year,
Okay.
building the following year, we would have actually seen a decrease that in our capital improvement fund.
Very good. Thank you, Chief.
Well,
Elena, sorry, please continue.
Thank you. So here we have a summary of general fund revenues. With the exception of appropriating reserves, there were no other revenue changes from your last presentations. We will go into further detail on the next slide for specific reserve balances information. As you can see here, at the maximum millage rate of 4.6989, the estimated tax collected would be 28.5 million, with an appropriated reserves usage of 650,000. If council was to reduce the millage by 0.0889 to 4.61, the estimated tax collected would be 28 million, with appropriated reserves usage of 1.2 million. The estimated tax savings of homestead property would be approximately $8 per $100,000 of taxable value. If council was to reduce the millage rate by 0.1212 to 4.5777, the estimated tax collected would be approximately 27.8 million, with an appropriated reserves usage of 1.4 million, Now, the estimated tax savings for homesteaded property would be approximately $12 per $100,000 of taxable value.
Question. The 4.5777, that's the rollback rate?
No, the rollback rate would be the 4.4593.
And what numbers would that produce?
That would be a reduction of 0.2396, and the estimated tax collected would be around 27 million.
27 million as opposed to the 27,826.
That is correct.
27 million. And when you talk about what this adds to the, well, I'll save it for later. Never mind. I'm good.
The 4.61, how many police officers is that?
All of these scenarios would be with your 10 additional deputies.
Helena, just for posterity, the rollback rate you said was 4.593 of 4.59?
4.4593.
4.4593, understood.
So, just a comment, if I may, so make sure that I understand it clearly. The last line, the appropriated fund balance, is the indicator what we would draw from our present fund balance within our finance policy, depending on the millage rate that's chosen.
Yes, that is correct. Now, in the next slide, we have the detail of each millage scenario, and then the applicable corresponding reserves usage, which I think is what you were asking about, Mayor. So if we look on here, under the maximum millage rate scenario, we would be using $650,000 for the purpose of funding contingency to deal with any fluctuations in revenues and or expenditures. With the millage rate scenario of the 4.61, we would be using $1.2 million for the purpose of funding contingency, but we also have the transfer to the Streets Improvement Fund of $550,000 for the pavement program, which would be a one-time expenditure, and it would qualify for the use of reserves. Now, if council were to look at the scenario of the 4.5777, in addition to the items already listed, we do have approximately $200,000 of one-time fleet capital equipment allocation for purchases that are mainly related to fire department equipment, and those would also qualify as one-time expenditures.
And what about at the rollback rate?
If we were to go beyond, then we would have to look at cutting operations.
How much?
Well, the 600, so it would be 27 million if we were using the rollback rate, and it would be 27.8 million if we were using the 4.5777. So we would be looking at a reduction of $800,000.
Okay.
So currently, and based on the September 30th, 2020 audited financial statements, the general fund reserves would be at 24% if we were to use the 1.4 million to reduce the millage rate to the 4.6100. Now, the current balance in our disaster reserve fund is approximately $3 million. The last two hurricanes that we had were Matthew and Irma, both in fiscal year 2017. We spent over that threshold with Matthew at 3.7 million and Irma at 4.8 million. So if council was to fund the disaster reserve to $5 million, we would be at a fund balance rate of 20%. So the City of Palm Coast policy establishes the range from 10 to 20%, so we are within policy. However, the Government Finance Officers Association recommends a minimum of 60 days of operating expenditures, which for the City of Palm Coast would equate to 17%.
If I may,
Please.
regarding the reserve funds, to see how serious this is. Today, I found out that the mayor of Jersey City, New Jersey. No. I couldn't go there personally, so I tried to find out. He had damaged to his city, estimated $35 million. Just with rains, not winds. Then I personally called a good friend of some of us over here, by the name, he's one of the councilmen in Elizabeth, Mr. I blanked for a second over here, I'll tell him in a second. And I asked about Elizabeth, which is the town that I used to live at. And so did Councilman Barbosa, so we're familiar with the area. I asked him, how much was your damages there in the city? 5, 6, 7, 8, $10 million? He said, Eddie, 100 million will not be enough, including the building that where the people died in Elizabeth. 100 million ain't going to be enough. And I asked him, where are you going to get that money? Oh, we don't have it. So when we, and I mean we, city, Palm Coast, us, the citizens, paid for this money that we have there at 28%. I think, in my opinion, with all the respect for my colleagues, I think it's kind of irresponsible, okay, if we agreed in taking any money from this reserve fund. That's our insurance. That's how we know that if something bad happens, like it happened, this happened just the very first week. They don't have the money to pay. Had they saved, they had it. They didn't save. They don't have it. We saved it. We have it. But this should be exactly for this type of things. And I think that we should, Manny Grover was the name of my friend. So I'm pretty sure that, especially Councilman Barbosa is familiar with Manny Grover, a councilman in New Jersey. I spoke with him today, and he's the one who told me about all of that. So if there's anything I kind of cringe at, it's the reserve money. I don't think we should touch this money. But that's not against, well, my opinion, and whatever my colleagues decide. If they decide any differently, then I'm only one vote. Thank you.
So,
May I?
go ahead, Councilman Clufus.
I also concur with my colleague. I think we shouldn't be proud of spending our reserve funds, especially for something, in my opinion, like the pavement program. I think we can all say that street quality isn't an emergency. It's a part of life. And having nice roads in Palm Coast makes part of Palm Coast what it is. You don't have too many terribly pothole-ridden roads and things like that because we keep up with our pavement program. But having to transfer funds from our reserves that are meant there for a rainy day and an emergency that we may not even be able to fathom at this moment. Those hurricanes were terrible, and the fact we got back-to-back after so many years, that was quite unexpected, and it could have been much worse. Flagler Beach even got away, luckily, with only losing part of A1A. My point being is that we shouldn't be proud of having to transfer out of our savings for a pavement program if we don't think that that's actually an emergency. That's not what these emergency funds are supposed to be used for. I understand that this is we're coming to some type of agreement here that fits everybody's taste, but there is push and pull, but that, to me, isn't something that can be answered in any other way. But I think we're in a situation now where we are fortunate enough to have such a high reserve fund balance that this makes it at least a bit feasible. But we should recognize what we're doing is definitely wrong, and we shouldn't promote this pattern, especially for future councils before us. And I think that's who we're trying to set up for success here. And the pavement program is something that if we kick further down the road, it's only going to cost more and more money. And that's why I think we should be more aggressive with talking about, how we could have gotten a phased approach in here to not be able to have to touch these type of reserve funds. But here we are, so we have to come to a consensus on how to move forward. So how do we do that? I'm willing to say that I am okay with these options. I don't think we should be hitting our reserve funds. So however we can come to a conclusion that includes all of us agreeing, but that is my stance. And perhaps everyone differs, but I would concur with Councilman Branquino that we shouldn't be touching our reserve funds.
All right, so I appreciate the comments, and in the spirit of debate, and I think that's what each of us is up here for, is to share, our opinion based on the research and the work that we've done so far. So I appreciate those very much. So let me share mine, and we'll go as well. A little more general. First for you, Helena, a question, if I may. When we experienced the emergencies in the past that you referred to, how did we collect funds from the federal government or the state, if there were any?
Very slowly.
Well, more importantly, how much when it was all said and done?
So the numbers that I read to you were the portion that was actually reimbursable. So we would receive 75% of the reimbursable amount, or with IRMA, up to 90%, depending on the hurricane, how
Okay.
disasters
And
declared.
of the total that you can recollect,
So
how much of that was, what percentage generally was reimbursable? Before, because you threw us a
For
big number, I
hurricane-
want to know what the real number was.
Well, it depends on the type of category. Some of them are 100%, so if it's security measures before the hurricane happens that are 100%, if it's after, the percentage decreases. It goes from 90% to 85 to 75. Now with Hurricane Irma, because it was such an impact to the whole state, the president did come back and reimburse it at 90%, which I think is the highest I've seen. But it did take a few years to get our reimbursements back. I think also the FEMA gets backed up with other disasters throughout the United States. So depending
So
on
kind of a cash flow issue as opposed to
It was
perhaps a
definitely a
balance
cash
issue
flow
over the
issue.
long haul. Okay, very good. The other point, and it resonates with me about this becoming a precedent for the future, and I agree. Tackling the fund balances, in an ideal world, they would always be as big as they could ever be. None of these future expenses are predictable, nor the magnitude of them. However, for the last 4 years, we have kept our millage rate the same, while our ad valorem property taxes have enjoyed rather significant increases over that period of time. My counter in the debate is I'm suggesting we tap the brakes at this point in time, knowing that we can, in fact, look at the millage rate in the future as something that is not set in stone. I'm afraid, like you were, that this becomes a precedent, that we become, that becomes a habit, that we don't address the millage rate, especially in the face of what I think we all agree and have actually voted on recently is, I can't say unprecedented, but significant growth here in the city of Palm Coast in the future, which will directly affect the ad valorem real estate value. So that's kind of a direction that I'm coming from. And please weigh in.
My thought is, find a happy medium here. Unfortunately, it is what we're going to have to do, where everybody wins.
In my career as a journalist, I covered so many hurricanes and other natural disasters, flooding, forest fires, so on and so forth. In enormous situations, big situations, the president declares a state of emergency. The governor asks for it, and he gets it. If we were to be hit hard, no doubt, that's what would happen. FEMA moves in, so on and so forth, people rebuild. We get our money back at some point down the road. It may take a little time, but we're made whole. But every major disaster I've seen, they've been made whole in the end. So I have no problem with tapping into the reserves. Your suggestion of putting the brakes on, I appreciate it. I'd be happier if we put the car in reverse for a little bit.
I just would like to add that, let me be blunt, let me be perfectly blunt. I think that touching the reserve funds, it's the easy way to govern. That is the easy way to govern. It's the one that doesn't require much of intelligence on our side. Touching the reserves, just because the government is going to give us the money back, is going to take years. We may need that money in those years. That's what the money's for. It's called emergency reserve funds. Let's not take those. That's the easy way out. No, I'm against it.
Mr. Mayor, if I can make one more
Please, yes.
comment. If we don't want to touch the reserves, why don't we make some cuts? I'd like to make a motion if I can,
Hold the thought just for a moment, please.
okay?
Elaine, I want to be sure, are you at the end of your presentation?
No, sir.
Would you hold the
Sure,
thought
absolutely.
so that we can see all that finance has prepared before we make any decisions or discussion on, that might change because of additional presentation? Please proceed and let me know when you get to the very end.
Thank you. So next, we will cover the fiscal year 2022 proposed budget in total. Uh-oh.
And you'll
We ran out of batteries.
earmark this slide so that we can come back to it when we're ready to discuss, so
Absolutely.
it'll be front and center.
Doug? It froze. Doug?
Gotta unplug it, plug it back in.
That's what we needed.
I would like to think it froze because of the enlightened discussion that we're having.
How about a round of applause for Doug?
Next. Okay, sorry about that. The fiscal year 2022 budget comes in at $248,635,694, which is approximately 16% higher than your fiscal year 2021 adopted budget. We will now cover our millage rate and property tax history. We will start with a look at the ad valorem revenue collections. As you can see, the city experienced a decline during the recession years and took approximately 10 years from 2008 to 2018 to make up the decrease. We have since experiencing growth. It's important to note that council has maintained the millage rate at 4.6989 since fiscal year 2019. So the increase in revenues is solely due to the increase in values and new construction. Here we have a chart that shows the history for the last 5 years of the millage rate, property values, receipts collected, and population. Now, the population estimates are from the Bureau of Economic Business Research website, except for fiscal year 2022. That is projected numbers that we received from our Community Development Department. The millage rate has stayed the same for quite a few years, and our property values continue to experience healthy growth. We also have in this chart the millage rate scenarios that we reviewed earlier, and you can see the expected revenue differences. So this is a little bit easier to look at because you have everything together in the same slide. The city's maximum millage rate for fiscal year 2022 cannot exceed the 4.6989. The rollback rate is 4.4593. Tonight, council is approving the tentative millage rate. The council is also approving the fiscal year 2021 revised budget and the fiscal year 2022 tentative budget. So at this point, we will need your decision on the millage rate so that we can prepare the appropriate resolutions tonight and to advertise for your final public hearing that's scheduled for September 22nd. Thank you.
And would you go back to the
Number 11,
the menu slide, if you will?
this one? No,
Nope.
the next one.
Yes, thank you. All right, if, I guess we'll start in order. Would you like to start off with a series of comments? We do need to come to a consensus this evening, or a majority, in order to move forward. So this would be the moment to speak our vision, our points, our desire here, and see where we're aligned and where we might be able to concede to each other. Please, anyone?
I'll go ahead.
Councilman?
This is for the councilman up here. Our decisions are our decisions. We need to stop attacking other people's decisions. To say it was an easy way out to do something else, you have a new mayor, 2 new councilmen. We're picking up from the last administration. People need to start respecting what each other's decisions are. I think my happy medium is for the 4.6100. That's where I stand.
Thank you, Councilman.
I think we've made virtually no effort to make any cuts. And if we don't want to dip into that reserve fund, I see cuts as the only way. I'd like to make a motion when I can. I don't know if I can now. I'd like to make a motion that we rescind the tennis, racquetball, pickleball, whatever the thing is. I understand we can't rescind what's been spent, but we can prevent any more bleeding. And I understand I'm being told that's $225,000. I don't know how we've managed to spend close to $1 million so far. Can you explain that to me? Because my understanding was we're taking so much out of CIP, and then there was about 900,000 plus left over. I know we're spending some money, but how do we get to 225?
So I believe the 225, and Carl Cody might have to help me here, is the portion from those general fund transfers that have been allocated to that project. So not necessarily what has been spent to date.
So it was only 225,000 allocated from the general fund, or did we take money from the general fund and put it someplace else? That's what I'm confused about.
The Racket Center had 3 funding sources. We had Capital Projects Fund, which those dollars was $1 million initially, was identified in the Capital Projects Fund in the past, several years ago, for the tennis center expansion, pickleball courts. Those dollars in the Capital Projects Fund.
Only $1 million was allocated?
No, I'm telling you about the 3 funding sources, so I'm
Okay.
starting with that funding source first. Those dollars that were in the Capital Projects Fund came from a transfer from the general fund into the Capital Projects Fund.
So we transferred general funds into the CIP?
Several years ago, yes.
So can we transfer them back?
So
Can we?
that would be a finance question. I
That's
don't know
fine.
what the limitations are in transferring back, where they came from, where they have to go back to.
As long as they're not expended, they would be able to be transferred back because it's unrestricted revenue.
So we could transfer them back if we rescind this racquetball, pickleball thing?
Well, I believe it's the funding source for the public works facility, so let's just
It's
have
hard
Carl
to hear you, I'm
explain
sorry.
the,
Right, so what we did, okay, so we'll go through the 3 funds. So Capital Projects Fund dollars was a small portion. Park Impact Fee dollars was another portion, and CRE dollars was another portion. And we finalized the budgets in October 10th when we presented them to council. The Park Impact Fees, due to the higher development, were higher than projected. And same with the CRE dollars, changed slightly. So we were able to minimize the Capital Projects Fund dollars. So it's roughly $289,000 of Capital Projects Fund dollars are going towards the Racket Center. The rest of the $5 and almost $500,000 is coming from Park Impact Fees in the CRA. So
Mr. Mayor, could I ask a question just for clarification, please?
Yes, please.
Of Carl. The 289, is that in this year's budget or is that in the complete total budget?
That's in the proposed 22 budget as a transfer from the Capital Projects Fund to the Park Impact Fee Fund. That is where the project is located and housed.
Okay, if I may, and I know this is not exactly legal, but I think it's important if we're going to achieve our legal obligations tonight, which is to reach a consensus and vote appropriately compliance with Chapter 200 of the Florida statutes. So let me see if I understand. What's the total budget for the tennis and racquetball expansion?
It's $5,750,000.
Okay, and that's not all to be spent in this budget year?
No, we spent some dollars this year. We're in the middle of the design phase.
What's the total amount of that $5 million and change that is coming from the general fund?
$289,000.
that 289,000 coming from this year's budget?
I don't know if the transfer,
The transfer occurred, I believe, in 2018. So your fund balance policy provides, for any access to be
Let me follow
transferred
up, if I
into
may.
capital. So
So
I
the-
believe it was fiscal year 2018.
289 that you're saying is coming from the general fund is from the capital improvement fund?
Yes,
Okay.
It's
Which was already there in
Yes, sir.
2018.
absolutely, yes.
So, to Councilmember Danko's point, if this council at some point were to go back and revisit the prior decision of a prior council to expand the tennis center completely, just completely, what would be the savings be from the general fund, i.e. the CIP?
we'd have to look at the expenses to date. We don't have all the current invoices because.
But what would the maximum be from just the capital improvement fund?
289.
289.
Right, the maximum would be 289.
And then the net, that's the gross, the net would be less whatever the city's already on the hook for what it's already done. Okay,
Correct.
I'm just trying to
Yes.
understand.
So
what
could
we're
we
talking about.
safely say $250,000?
I don't know what's been spent to date.
No. And that's only, we're talking this year. By rescinding this, we would save money down the road. And we're not going to be able to build this thing for $5.6 million anyway.
Councilmember Danko, let me, just for clarity, what I'm understanding is that for purposes of our budget
Mm-hmm.
and our millage, the savings that we're all looking for has to come from the general budget, not from these other items, not from the impact fees or the other items. So, and Helena, you correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing tonight is that if this council at some point were to decide to say, no more tennis expansion, the total savings, whether it was this year or next year, the total savings that could be attributed to the budget would be 289,000.
Well, some of that's been spent, it would be less than that.
Yeah, maximum.
Maximum, I just said
And
maximum.
Is that to this coming, the 2022 budget?
I asked
So-
that question.
Mr. Rushman, so Councilman Danko, let me offer this, just a thought, okay? Regarding tennis expense, so I'm new on the dais, and I've never received a presentation about the tennis racket facility, and there may be others that don't have the depth of knowledge of others here. Let me make this suggestion. If we were to postpone our discussion on tennis expenses for this budget this evening, with a commitment that staff will provide us with a full presentation that includes a business model, revenue and expense, and timelines on how and when that money would be spent, for the purpose of the discussion by City Council to decide whether we should proceed or not proceed with that project. My concern tonight is that we may never come, first of all, I'm not fluent with the numbers that are involved and the potential upside or downside of the project. I truly am not. If we are making a decision tonight and not understanding the nature of the project, I think it's a mistake, but the commitment I'm making is that we will address it. In other words, it won't disappear because we didn't get to it tonight, but I don't want it to override other suggestions that others may have in the budget tonight.
But I understand, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, we have the opportunity to put 200 and something odd $1,000 back into this. Is that correct or not?
No, because they might have spent some.
They spent some of it, but 289,000, but
100 could be 150.
I just don't know. Now, we could also put that money back when we have the discussion, so
we could. You are aware of the initial figure we were given to build this thing? And that was based on estimates done before the construction costs went through the ceiling.
Yeah, and again, I'm sort of a business model guy.
Yeah.
I don't know what it represents until I know what the up and down and what the revenue and the expense associated over a timeline are.
Because
So-
I think what we would need to see, if we follow your suggestion, is we would actually need to see a cost projection now based on construction materials.
Exactly.
Not on one previous that we got before.
And we do, what we are currently working on, we do have a construction management firm on board, and we have a full design team, and We've had numerous discussions on the design, the preliminary schematic design, the projected cost. We are making some changes to the design to adhere to the current construction dollars. So if we do come back, we could also have the construction management firm available. We could go through a detailed cost estimate analysis.
But
with
you
the
do
budget plan.
agree that we are going now to be getting less than we were getting before?
Not necessarily. We simplified some of the structural work. We changed some of the shape of the configuration of the building, and make it more simplified to build and construct.
Well, that's less, right? I mean, it doesn't take a genius to go into Home Depot and buy a 2x4.
Yeah, why can't that price come down then?
And
Well, again,
I'm
so-
tired of being interrupted,
I-
Mr.
You're
Mayor.
interrupting the
do
mayor,
understand.
though.
Please,
But there could be, based on our business model that we discuss up here, on their business model, there could be a suggestion to reconfigure, to change the theme, to change the concept. In other words, I'm just saying, I really don't know enough.
okay, I'm willing to
jump.
give you the time, then,
And
as
with the
long as
commitment-
we
with the
do get back
commitment-
to it.
Right, and I'll let the interim city manager know that this will become an agenda
Okay,
item.
and I'll hold off on my motion
And
to
give
rescind.
staff time to prepare this so that we can address it properly. That would be my request.
That's fine, that's fine. I just wanted to let you know, I've been opposed to this from day one.
Yeah.
We have these impact fees, which we have to spend, obviously. But we also have a list of about 22, 23 different things on a wish list that Park and Recreation has that they've never prioritized. And so my objection to this was because we didn't prioritize that list. Who knows, maybe a community center for seniors, a senior center would be more important. And I'm just throwing things out, maybe more smaller parks throughout the city. But I'd like to see
And when
rather
we
than
look
us
at that
spend
model,
this 5
that would be an
points.
ideal time to
Right.
add to that agenda item to prioritize. I think that's
If we're on that
I think
same
it would be a
page,
responsibility of ours to follow that through, yes.
thank you very much, and I
Mayor.
will rescind my motion to rescind.
Mr. Mayor, so
Rufus.
out of the goal of trying to have a construction conversation here, I understand that Councilman Danko's been against the tennis project, the Regional Racket Center since its inception, which was actually years and years ago, but since it's come before us, that's understandable. But I would just like to ask Councilman Danko what the last city amenity.
Ask me,
Oh, I'm
please.
sorry, ask the mayor to ask Councilman Danko what the last city amenity you used was. Try to paint a picture for what you view Palm Coast being so that I can understand how we can try to cut these budgets so that prioritizing things that you think are important for the city. I mean, I don't see you at the Holland Park opening. I see all of our other council members at our parks and recreation facilities whenever there's a grand opening or any type of, events. There'll be senior games tomorrow at the tennis center if you'd like to be there. But I'm curious, what's the last amenity that you used?
So I'm not going to pass the question along.
I'd be
But
happy
what
to
I-
answer it,
and
Mr.
I'm-
Mayor.
I'm not, what I'm going to say is, I understand your question,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand your history and seniority on the dais, and I respect that. I'm not sure that that question or the answer to it is relevant to tonight's discussion. It will be very relevant if we when we bring back the discussion and we prioritize our amenities. And I would encourage you, and hopefully we'll do this in a short time. I don't know what end it would produce this evening.
That's totally
So
fair.
if you'll bear with me on that, I will make sure, and I have a note, that we will address that question when we get to that discussion. Fair
Excellent.
enough?
And I'm sure there will be a prepared statement, but the fact is I just don't see Councilman Danko using anything that we budget here. I'm curious why he moved to Palm Coast.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. I feel I need to respond to this
All right,
attack.
please respond to me.
I'm sorry. The last amenity I used was our saltwater canals with a boat that I borrowed from a friend of mine. Those canals are in desperate shape. They need to be dredged. They're at 3 feet dead center where they should be 12 feet dead center. We have residents that can't get their boats in and out unless it's high tide. And we haven't saved a penny for this. Not a penny. And you're looking at an enormous amount of money to dredge these canals in the C-section, an enormous amount of money.
and I
So
would-
that's the last amenity I used. And to me, quite frankly, that's the most important amenity we
And
have in
I would
Palm Coast.
encourage you to bring up that priority when we have this discussion as well, if you would.
I will be happy to.
Mr. Reichman, you had a question?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to remind the council, these are valuable discussions, but for tonight, as you said so well, Mr. Mayor, we have 2 decisions to make. We've got to set a millage rate, and that millage rate's got to be consistent with the budget. And we've got a budget in front of us that we've been working on for a long time. So I would suggest to the council, let's focus on the budget that's in front of us and try to tie that into a millage rate so we can be efficient and do what we legally need to do under Chapter 200 of the Florida statutes, which has passed 2 resolutions tonight, one with a number in it for the millage rate and the other with the budget.
Mr. Mayor, I think, and in brevity, thank you, Mr. Reichman. I would be comfortable with the 4.6100 proposed millage rate. That's just putting it out there.
Personally, I think that we should keep the 4.6989. And the only reason why I'm giving the sheriff the extra 4 guys, it's because we got $470,000 from communications tax, FSN tax, and the state tax. And I love you guys. But that's the only reason why I get it. I met with the sheriff, and 6 guys, in my opinion, were enough. But due to the fact that we got this extra money, and believe me, this is not political. What I'm doing here right now, giving the extra guys, it's because I understand. It's not political, has nothing political behind what I'm saying. Absolutely nothing, okay? And there's other emergencies out there. Fire is an emergency, very much so. And believe it or not, public works. And if you don't think public works is an emergency, department, think again. This is the reason why I'm giving the extra 4 guys. It's because, so I believe that we shouldn't do the work of the Flagler County appraiser. He's the one who raised the taxes. We're keeping it since 2018. Our millage rate stayed. He is the one who raised taxes. He is the one we should be directing our anger to if we had to. My house went in value, $100,000. Shall I not pay any 1 more cent on that? We gotta pay it. If my house came down in price, the taxes would go down. This is the law life. This is how things go. This is how government works. My house went up in value. I doubt that anyone's house over here didn't go up in value. Meanwhile, nobody wants to pay an extra cent for that. Staying at the same rate, my taxes will go up. In between 19, if I'm not mistaken, in between $19 and $22 for the life of me. What we're doing here today. I'm sorry. Apologize.
We're talking about consensus on millage rate. Mr. Barbosa?
The 4.61 is my happy medium.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, so far what I've heard is Mr. Barbosa at 4.6100.
I'm sorry, Mr. Reichman, let me just, let me ask Mr. Danko, because
I'm
we're right here.
my position on this is the rollback rate.
Okay. All right, so at this point, I would ask for a motion.
I move to set the proposed millage rate at 4.6100 mils. Or, I'm sorry, that wouldn't be
Excuse me,
mils, correct?
Mr. Mayor,
They're
procedurally, we do need to follow the agenda pursuant to Florida law. And the next item, we will get there. Thank you for that motion. But it's, and I hate to say it, but it is a little premature. But according to our agenda, we do need to move to agenda item E2.
Commercial break, yeah.
So at this point,
We'll take a little recess.
at this point, I need to call a recess.
Just 5 minutes so we can gather the paperwork so you can move on to your next item.
Yes, you have what you need to do that.
So I'm understanding from council that you would like us to prepare the
Resolutions?
resolution for the millage rate at 4 point,
So we have
We don't have a consensus yet.
we have what appears to be a majority, so you have to do your numbers, so please do the numbers, yes. So how, you need 5 minutes? So you need a recess.
just a few minutes so we can get the correct paperwork.
So would the public please bear with us for a minute while the new arithmetic is applied to the paperwork that's required by legislative law?
Well, I mean, there has to be consistency between the millage rate that you will be voting on this evening
Right.
and the amounts and the numbers in the budget, also take into consideration the action you're going to take under agenda item E2, which has to do with the CRA, in your capacity as a CRA board.
Shouldn't the recess be taken after, so she could prepare the resolution? The rest shouldn't it be
completed.
once we.
Mr. Mayor, it'd be appropriate if we're going to have a recess, we have a motion and a second for a 5-minute recess.
I move to recess for 5 minutes.
Second.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye. Affirmative.
Folks, it'll be 5-minute recess.